Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit. Mishmi Chulhis, Conrakat Kanyon, CoyoteWoman, Sayers-Roods. Right here, right now, we are in Yalamu, also known as Ramaytush Ohlone territory. It's so very important that we respect and regard Indigenous protocol by becoming familiar with these spaces and places that we occupy in today's post-colonial settler society. I am a Mutsun Ohlone woman. I identify as a California native. I come from Indian Canyon Nation, the only federally recognized Indian country between Sonoma and Santa Barbara along central coastal California. That being said, my family is not federally recognized tribally, so we are a state-recognized community on federally recognized land that is off the grid, a mile-long canyon that we steward and have been responsible for since time immemorial. My mother has opened up that land for all Indigenous people in need of land for ceremony. So I'm a very lucky, privileged, and blessed Indigenous woman, able to say that I've been born and raised on the land of my ancestors, where my grandmothers, 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 grandmothers have always been from, as well as being raised in a tribal, traditional, and intertribal community space, where Indigenous protocol has allowed me to witness community coming humbly, engaged in consent culture, and respectful protocols. And so that was my day-to-day life. And then growing up out there in mainstream society, awesome, in mainstream society, I saw other things. When I was 5, I was talking to a young boy at school, and I was talking about how I was a proud Native woman, or child at the time. I'm a proud Native. If you're Indian, you're dead. When I was about 5. Was it his responsibility? Maybe, to be respectful, interacting with different people, different cultures. He didn't know, he's still learning. Was it the responsibility of his parents? Maybe. What about the education system? So, being an Indigenous kid, and then now as an adult, as a woman, in this world, in mainstream, societally, culturalist environment, Americentrism is raised with capitalism, consumerism, materialism, disposable society. We are not accountable. Americentric perspectives of settler colonial society is raised in a not so accountable, not so reciprocal relationship with the environment. And so, one of my elders, Dr. Gerald Bay Wilson, has always said, America is spiritually, morally, and ethically bankrupt. My mother has taught me that America is built on lives and deaths of Indigenous peoples and brown peoples. So, as an Indigenous person who gravitates to the art, who took that silly Myers-Briggs test and learned that I'm an empath, I've been in this environment where it's not so conducive to my spiritual health. However, cultural resilience, and I'm inspired by a community that are doing so many amazing things. And there is something to be said when we witness our community or our role models within our community, because they're attainable. We can interact with them. And when you have your role models see you, interact with you, there is nothing more powerful. It is so amazing when I have had opportunities to engage with community members who are, I'll just call them spiritual badasses, either in cultural revitalization, language revitalization, all these community members who are doing amazing work. And then I myself, in this effort of raising awareness, honoring truth and history, when I get a chance to be in their presence and they see me and they actually look at me and say, I see you, that you're doing the work, and I appreciate you, there's something really powerful about that. And that's what we need to recognize, that within all of these spaces, these bioregions, these communities, these ecological systems, that when we connect and ground ourselves to where it is that we are present, we we can connect on many levels, not just spiritual, not just grounded and environmentally, not just communally, but all aligned. And so, as an Indigenous artist, I did not create this map. Hatimo Link did, but California has in excess of 250 languages. So, do you think we walked around saying, speak my language? Or possibly engage with each other in a more communal and humble fashion? How long does this pound go till?
2:15.
Okay, cool. Awesome. And so, I'm going to stand up here. Through my work, people like to tokenize me for my beautiful voice. I sing a grandmother's song that came to me differently than it was taught. And in those moments where I recognize that people give me that opportunity to share my voice, I then share my voice in saying, how else is your community or your space including Indigenous perspectives and peoples? Because when teaching the teachers, we can talk about messages and messaging, about accuracy in history, accountability through how we tell our stories, and connection to how our actions and our words impact not only ourselves, our community, our environment, but impact next 7 generations. So with the work I do, I sometimes say that quote, I will do what I can, when I can, where I can, wherever I can, for as long as I can, to honor truth and history, to attempt to honor my ancestors in a good way, and to be a good ancestor in training. That has led me to connect with way too many people without the capacity or infrastructure or resources to help those connect. But I am doing a lot, and when I look back at my calendar, I have to remember to give myself a pat on the back because I always feel inadequate. However, some community members, some of my friends who don't do what I do because they're more introverted, they're like, you're just doing so much. I'm sitting here like, I'm not doing enough. So I wanted to point out a few years ago, I self-published a language coloring book because when we think about cultural resilience, language as part of our communities is really important. And tying it into the present, my language is the Mutsun dialect of Ohlone territory. Ohlone territory spans from San Francisco to Oakland down to Monterey Bay. I have a question to the people in the room. How many of you recognize this live long and prosper? Mm-hmm. This is a gesture that is in Star Trek. Star Trek, there is a language, the Vulcan or Klingon language. Well, Mark Olkrin is the creator of that language. He went to UCSC, he went to UC Berkeley, and he got his PhD in the Mutsun dialect. However, and when you learn the foundation of how a language should operate functionally and respectfully, you can tap into your intellectual property rights and create an amazing alien language that thousands of peoples praise, have marriages in, write ballads in. However, where's the accountability to the community or the people of whose knowledge he got an understanding from? Does anyone, unless you are passionate about research, does anyone, or the people that I encounter, that I teach, that I tell people about this, do you think anyone knows that? Do you think anyone knows he studied California indigenous languages? That's where our society and our environment and our community is lacking. I really believe it's through indigenous pedagogies and teachings and wisdoms, reconnecting to all of our ancestral wisdoms, that we can bring into the day-to-day life in today's modern post-colonial settler society to start strategizing resilient, sustainable futures. However, if I'm going to be a resilient native, I can't keep talking to people about just catching them up about truth and history here. We're coming up on the 250th anniversary of the Portola expedition, and now we have signs saying the Ohlone Portola Trail. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to possibly offend a few community members if there are present. It's like saying the Hitler Jew Trail. There's just so many things that might feel a little wrong with that, but because people don't know about truth and history, they don't know how it's offensive. So how do I compare? Same thing with the mission curriculum being taught in schools. The mission curriculum was a one-sided narrative, which is great to teach the kids that. However, we need a more holistic opportunity to present and allow the perspectives of diverse lenses be presented. So again, I had to talk to teachers and community members how the mission curriculum, how would you feel if you were a first or second generation child of family members who were in Auschwitz? How would it feel like if you had to recreate that structure, that building? I have to make that analogy just to have a valid part of conversation. So here I am attempting to be a resilient Native going forward to try and bring in perspective into these circles, yet I'm still spending time trying to educate community members. So, well, I learned how to make a mini-zine. And from it, this little mini-zine talks about the roaming Ohlone. This little figure has two big conversations. One, he's an accurately depicted Native figurine in regalia because Indigenous peoples don't wear costumes. And he also talks about, think about it. Do you think Indigenous peoples were consulted in the past about their image and their depictions and their likeness in any form of media? Let's think about like the Land O'Lakes girl. Do you think they consulted with any natives or any of the mascots? Do you think any natives were consulted with when their likeness was presented? And then he's the roaming Ohlone. He takes pictures like Elf on a Shelf. And he takes a lot of amazing pictures, so he's met some fun people. So if you go online, his social media game is on point. And he talks about being in post-colonial settler society. So wherever he goes, he attempts to tag the native territory that he's in. And there are times that he struggles, because he's still learning too. And so it's a learning journey. And then another part of this mini-zine is all of the information that I kind of attempted to share with you. There are 8 languages in the Bay Area. There's also a map. 8 languages. Did you know that the word Ohlone is a misnomer? First, the Spaniards came to California. They said, costaños, costaños. Coastal Bay Area natives. They didn't engage in consent culture and say, may I ask how you identify? They just automatically said. Quite similarly with how some people don't like to respect gender pronouns. Consent culture, what a concept. And so also, how do you cut paper without scissors? A little bit of pressure. And so as I come and talk to classes and or even adults, I talk to them about how do you cut without scissors? Resilience. You have the opportunity to fold and crease to encourage it to cut in a straight line. How do you take one piece of paper and turn it into an 8-page mini-zine? Well, you just have one slip of paper. Sometimes you have to have an OCD approach to folding paper, because when you fold, the crease will try and tell you which way to go, and you're going to have to fold over and relearn and encourage it to go a certain way, because if you fold it and just go with the flow, it might take you the wrong way. In that, you can play with a lot of analogies of that teaching. And oral narratives are so very important in our culture and community. So ways you can honor native land is, this image right here is a mural at San Francisco State University. To honor native land, we recognize that this mural is in Yelamu, Ramaytush Ohlone territory, AKA San Francisco. And the word Ohlone is a misnomer, because let's think about where our data and our information comes from. If communities don't respect oral narratives or oral traditions, there's a priority on Western settler colonial approaches to documenting history. So I'm gonna ask you to spit out the first word you think of when I say a word. And I encourage you to just say it immediately when I say this word. Prehistoric.
Dinosaurs.
Thank you. So guess what? When I work with archaeologists, when they find my ancestor remains or my community's ancestor remains or cultural resources, they're prehistoric artifacts. So wait, we got dinosaurs way over here. And then we've got Homo sapiens sapien over here down history. This is still 10,000. Humans are like 200,000. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Who did he run into? Can we cite those sources quickly? We can name the freaking ships' names, but can we name the languages that the native people spoke? The people or their neighbors? 1600s. Well, Plymouth and all those other areas. Oh wait, 17 and 1800s. California is colonized. Did you know that the Spaniards suffered from scurvy when they came here? 1492, 1600s, 2020. That's documented history. All of this, natives, indigenous communities of all around the world have been surviving and maintaining and respecting and stewarding the land. Yet that is barely ever acknowledged anywhere. So how are we going to learn from this? How are we going to talk about reciprocal relationship to all living systems? Holistic systems versus today's Western settler science that says break apart, put together, see how it functions, scientific theory, yet not understand placebo effect. Holistic systems, power of the mind, power of prayer, power of community. And so I created this as a free open source educational tool on my website for people to print off and hand out. Because I don't care about federal recognition, but I do care about cultural recognition. My community, our community, from allies to indigenous cultures and communities, to be able to see that we are living and resilient peoples, and we're offering the education to be put in the hands of the community to then open source and make it available to more people. It's not my responsibility to teach you what community show is and that should know. It's our responsibility to connect with each other, to share and learn from each other. So as an indigenous artist and an educator, again, I do what I can, when I can, where I can, for as long as I can. So I started Kanyon Konsulting as a consultation firm to educate people and community on a one-on-one basis to agency basis, to talk about bringing indigenous pedagogies into our field, all fields. From permaculture. Permaculture is a new thing. Did you know that those are indigenous teachings from around the world? Where's the accountability? Yes, never in a time has it been presented as such. Yes, never has this teaching over from those lands been presented over here. However, these teachings, these practices, we need to be accountable to. Just bring that practice in, humbling ourselves and respecting community. And I'm honored to share space with these two amazing panelists, and I do want to hear what they say, and I'm totally open for questions at the Q&A portion. But I'm really appreciative that you are here in Yalama, in Ramaytush Ohlone territory. And I'm happy for those of you who got to witness me up on the main stage, because SOCAP's doing a good job at an accelerating rate from me having a community member push me on stage to ensure that they honored native land. And the stage manager was not so happy 2 years ago, to now, where last year I got to present a land acknowledgement, and this year a land acknowledgement with the chairman of the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone People and an Indigenous forum and a panel. So that is a beautiful way of being in solidarity with Indigenous peoples, not just saying come and sing a song and come back again and sing a song. Let's start a relationship and let's build community. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Should I copy?
Just gotta plug in my drum for one. Morning, everyone. Thank you to Kanyon. That's sweet. Thank you, Kanyon. Always good to see you. Always good to see you. I wanna say "Simoma" in my language. That's how are you? Mike Habida, Makamoma Hilikana, Kashaya Chach, from Makamoma Hilikana in our language, which is Dry Creek, Geyserville, just about an hour, 20 minutes north of here, and Habida, which is on the coast, Point Arena, Manchester, and Kashaya, just Stewart's Point, there on the coast as well. So I'm from the coast. I'm a coast boy, and I wanted to start off today by sharing a song from my people, and the reason that we start off things with a song is not just to honor tradition. We're calling our ancestors. We're reminding ourselves. We're connecting to our prayers, to the ceremonies, and I just wanted to share that. Maybe we could all take a deep breath together, one collective breath. One more breath. And when I start the song, I want to maybe just think about a prayer for yourself, a prayer for maybe your relatives back home that couldn't be here, maybe a prayer for your community, maybe a prayer for someone that's not doing so well, maybe a prayer for the earth. Maybe you got big prayers like me. I pray these big prayers that I think are impossible, but when they come true. So I want to just take this moment to just think about our prayers Maybe you guys already did that. Maybe you went on a run this morning and already did that, but we're gonna bring it into this space here. Relatives here, our Yalamu family here in San Francisco Bay Area, also our Washan, our Rumsen, our Esalen peoples, our local peoples from here, our Miwok, our coastal Miwok people, all the relatives from here. And you know, when we think about our relatives from here, we acknowledge them. We acknowledge that they're buried right here along the marina, buried right here. Thousands of years, some of those grave sites dating back to 60,000 years, 100,000 years, some of those grave sites right here. And so we acknowledge them, and even though the Ohlone peoples don't have a home base here or a reservation here, they still live here, like our sister Kanyon. Shout out to Indian Kanyon, where she's from down south. And I just want to, make sure that those people are always part of this conversation. And those people are with us, the ancestors are with us from here. And recognizing that the local indigenous people, they don't have a homeland here is really important. Also recognizing that the original people from here are still not recognized. In 2000 going into 2020, the original people from here are still not recognized as tribal people. And part of that is understanding occupation, understanding settler colonialism, understanding that we are at war. We've been at war for over 500 years for a lot of the tribes. So for us California Native peoples, only 175 years plus. I'm a 4th generation survivor of genocide. And I'd like to introduce myself as a 4th generation survivor of genocide to remind folks how recent this is. Talking about my grandmother, Rose Elgin, who was first contact, 1913. He was 8 years old. And we got my grandfather, Alfred Elgin, and then we had my mother, and then we had me. And so to remind you that in California, first contact is relatively recent. A lot of people think, like the mission system, 1763 to 1820s, that was first contact, but not for all of us. We're in the far north, up here. So that started down south in San Diego. So our first contact in the far north wasn't until later. And so understanding these things, understanding that history is really important. And I think as a young person, people look at us and they're like, oh, this guy doesn't, he's just a youngster. He's learning still. And I am, and I admit that. I'm a little older now. I'm 40 years old now. But I always like to remind people of that, of the genocide that happened here. There's still extermination laws on the books here in California until the early 1900s. So we're talking about laws that were instituted to exterminate tribes. And I'm not saying this so that we feel guilty this morning. I'm not saying this so we're hurting. I'm saying this to open the discussion. What does the end of occupation look like in the Americas? What does that look like? What does that look like across the U.S.? What does that look like here in California? Does it look like demilitarization? Does it look like an end to the borders, the colonial borders that exist here? What does that look like to you? How are you assisting tribes in your lives? What are you doing in your life to assist tribes to give back where you live? That's what we're here to ask. We're here to ask you to be allies with us. And the whole issue with genocide is what happened with genocide is that they devalued tribal people, they devalued us. They treated us as property. And indigenous children were sold into slavery up until the mid-1900s in this country. And in California, in 1852, they spent over $1 million for the extermination of tribal people. That means $5 for a head, 25 cents for an ear. And then you would take that down there to the recorder's office, the assessor's office, where you go to pay your land tax. And they would give you $5 a head, 25 cents an ear. That happened up until 1910s, right here. And the same people that they praise, the same people that are on the money. Andrew Jackson, part of it, right? General Vallejo, city of Vallejo, one of the biggest Indian killers around here. Juno Paracera, one of the biggest Indian killers around here. All those cities up north, Kelseyville, one of the biggest Indian killers around, right? Andrew Kelsey, the governor of California, William Boggs, one of the biggest Indian killers around here. And so Peter Barnett, one of the governors of California, I think the first governor of California, led vigilante squads into these hills. So we're dealing with first contact, brutal first contact. We're dealing with genocide. And we're dealing with, what are the repercussions of that 1, 2, 3 generations later? I'm 4th generation survivor of that, right? And so as we heal, we need to heal the land as tribal people. We look at our lands are beautiful. I'm from Sonoma County. It's one of the most beautiful places on earth. How many of y'all in Sonoma County? Right. So that's where I live. Sonoma County, I live in forest. I live in the forest. And that area is thankfully is now protected. A lot of those trees, the original relatives over there. But in the early 1900s, that land was decimated. They got a town called Burnville. The original name of that town was Stumptown. And that's where they slaughtered our relatives, the Redwood. Those are our relatives. We call them our relatives. They slaughtered them, made stumps out of them, made a whole town called Stumptown. And the one family, the Cazadero family, another city that's named after them, they're not not Cazadero, in Occidental. Well, there's one family there that owned all the forest land, all the way from Occidental, coastal redwoods, all the way to Sacramento. What did they do to that land? Decimated it. Completely wiped out all the old growth. And so 96% of that forest, the old growth forest, is gone. That's not from climate change. That's not from destruction from tidal waves or, from the water freezing or the water melting and the water beds rising. No, that's from contact. It's from settlement. It's the impact of settlement. So we have 4% of that forest left. We have a lot. It's all growing back now. It's on a third generation of growing back. We talk about the marshlands. 80% of the marshlands in California gone. What happened to them? Settlement. They were dredged. The water was pushed out of there. They were dried out. Areas that were once dense communities, largest dense communities, like our brothers here from Europe and from other areas, they were pushed out of their lands by the dams. Their traditional lands, they dammed right around them, and their village site was flooded out. So the areas where they want to remove Indians, they just dam them. Upstream, they're removed. That's why the dams are there. They're not there for geothermal. They're not there for the geoelectrical, whatever they talk about. They're literally there to remove Indians. But the dams are there. So we talk about post-colonialism. How can we talk about post-colonialism when we're still existing within the colonial framework? I'm gonna say it again. How can we talk about post-colonialism when we're still existing in a colonial framework under occupation, under military occupation here? And I don't say all these things to make us hurt, make us feel bad. I say these things to remind us that we have a lot of work to do to restore those wetlands. How many of y'all have gone out there and planted some traditional trees back in your homelands? Restore some wetlands. How many of y'all restored some forest lands? Look around the room, there's only a couple people raising their hand. A few people raising their hand. But we have a lot of work to do. Out of those wetlands and out of the deforestation that happened here, the genocide, I call it the eco-genocide. The eco-genocide of the Northwest Coast. Not just our region, the whole Northwest Coast. For the establishment of those cities, LA, San Francisco, right? All the redwoods are right here in these houses right here. Right there, all that old growth right over here. And the marina in these houses, right? So the eco-genocide that happened, the result of that was the destruction of our way of life. It wasn't just the timber, it was keystone species, it was the grizzly, it was the puma, the black cats, black panthers. We have black panthers right here in the hills in Oakland. We used to have them right here, black panthers, the big ones. Grizzly bear, the big ones. Wolf. These are all keystone species. One of the big ones is salmon. And as a tribe, as we fight for these things, as we fight for the salmon, as we fight to hold on to these things, our abalone got put on a danger list this year, right? We can't even harvest it now as tribal people, not even us. It's on the endangered list now. So right here on the coast, we can't even get our traditional foods. The salmon. How many tribes are in here representing that have salmon flowing right now?
Bad, bro. It's real bad situation.
We're salmon people here too. My next generation doesn't even know that.
So there's a lot going on with our land, with our water. The salmon have been decimated. When we talk about all these species that are decimated, we always got to remember the people that live close to that land, the tribal people. The Wetma, our sisters in the south, the Rumson, the Estlin, who just got their land back. They got some money, like $14 million grant to buy some land back. Finally, in 2019, they just got some land back. I want to acknowledge them. I'd like to also acknowledge our Shire relatives. They got 700 acres back last year. They bought it back, $34 million. They bought coastal land back, so we have coastal access in one of my tribes. Also like to acknowledge our sister Cheryl Seidner, who spoke at the end of the Wolverine genocide. She talked about the Eureka peoples getting Bloody Island back. sang a song, and she said, this is going to be our land again, Bloody Island, where this massacre took place. Last week, they just got that back. They got the deed to that land. It took 15 years. 15 years they've been fighting for that land. It took 15 years for people to listen to them, right? And so, for all of you out there, I see some tribal people in here, don't give up. Don't give up on your land. If you have a dream, if you have a vision for your land, for your people, don't give up on that. It might take 15 years for people to listen, but eventually they're going to hear your voice. And so don't give up those fights. But we're here to talk about art and resistance, and I work with young people. We do this magazine called Snag Magazine, and I just want to close out with kind of a little brief shout out to Snag and the work we've done with artwork. Teaching youth about their culture and their identity is one of the most important things you can offer to kids. And for folks that in here, how many of y'all in here are teachers or involved in education? Anyone? You involved in education? We have this magazine as a resource for y'all. So I want to offer it as there's only like 6 or 7 copies here, but I want to offer it to folks that are interested and want a copy of Snag Magazine to take back as a resource for your community. It comes with a music CD, and so one of the things that we believe is that, because a lot of people tell you like, oh, focus on your art, focus on one thing. You just get good at that one thing, and you're gonna be successful one day. Just follow that dream, right? And I've heard that too a lot, but I do a lot of different things, and that's actually saved my life. Because I do a little bit of graphic design, do a little music production, do a little bit of traditional singing, do a little bit of ceremony work, and then working with young folks. I'm a teacher right now, Ohlone, high school teacher. So I do wear a lot of different hats. Now I'm a natural builder. That's my latest hat that I picked on. Another one on. But I wanted to share that with the magazine, I've been able to learn. I've been able to sharpen all those skills because young people are like, hey, we want to print on skateboards. I'm like, oh, well, I don't even really know how to screen print, but I guess we're going to learn how to screen print now. And so, we have a screen printing press, our youth, print our own shirts and posters and things. The youth were like, oh, we want to make a music video. I'm like, oh, all right, I don't really know how to do that, but we're going to learn today, right? And so, through this process of teaching young people, I've grown and learned a lot from them. And right now, today, we're building Artist Retreat Center in Sonoma County in Forestville called the Nest Community Arts Center. And that's my latest hat, natural builder hat. And so we have we just finished we're in the process of finishing our first building here. We purchased the land in 2012. We claimed Homo territory up in Forestville, Sonoma County, and we're building our second building, which is this building here, the CoyoteWoman building, shaped like a seashell, which will be our music studios and our youth program offices. The first building we're just completing is the visual art studio, and so we're happy to share more about the Nest with y'all. And please come take copies of the magazine. Also, I'll pass it on to Remy.
Diné, Remy and Ishia, Ashimi and Nishlin, Nami Bashas Chin, Isabella Dasha Che, Base which I Dashanala, Zipla Jim Benasha. My name is Remy. I come from the Black Mesa region of the Navajo Reservation. I am an artist, I think by trade, and I think that's spilled over into activism just because of the way of our life and what we encountered on Black Mesa in terms of being close to one of the most dangerous strip mining operations in the world. A lot of the work that I do is all about confronting a lot of the problems that we have here in society, whether it be environmental or social. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of my work and show you, some of the possibilities in terms of art and change, because it's us as artists that we're tasked to create the images that people get behind. So in terms of social movements, so in terms of any type of progress in terms of people of color, it's been brought forward, it's been pushed forward by artists. And so I'm humbly appreciative to be a part of not only this table here, but other artists that have come before me, including those that have been a part of my family as well. And so as a person who's visiting here, I actually let my folks here speak first because it's their land that I'm visiting. It's their land that I'm currently occupying. So I wanted to give them a shout out, just to say thank you, really appreciate it. So I created an entity way back in the day. First of all, let me go ahead and back up. I have a background in military background, that is. And I went to school to basically, I joined the Navy so that I could basically get college money. And so for a very long time, this was a part of my life. Going into preparing for disaster situations, becoming a member, search and rescue operations. So this type of training and everything like that has helped me in the direct action world. When I've merged direct action and military tactics, that has become unstoppable. And I wouldn't say that now with the confidence that maybe I would have prior to Standing Rock, but in terms of Standing Rock, we were able to carve out many, many different wins against the world's greatest army. None of that really made it to the mainstream. A lot of my friends are still facing charges, but that all kind of plays into what we're up against and what we have been up against, because as Indigenous people, you look at Standing Rock, you also look at First Contact. Standing Rock was about extractive industries, resources. When Columbus came over, the first thing that he did was separated the women, the children, and the men. And he forced all the boys and the men to work in camps. The women were, and the girls were sex slaves. And so when you look at history in the last 520 plus years, you fast forward to today, not much has changed because children are still being separated. Children are still being disappeared. And so a lot of what I do is out of pain because that history, as an Indigenous male, we have to figure out, for me personally, what is our role in society? A lot of other races or other, maybe other people have, hey, this is for them, this is reserved for that. But as Indigenous males, I think that we were the first threat to colonization. And, in terms of what we're up against, even in our own communities, you're looking at, while young black males are killed more frequently, Indigenous men are killed more per capita than any other race. And so we have to start looking at these things and figuring out, and carving out our own spaces. And so when I went into the military, I wanted to be a SEAL. I wanted to, do all these things in other countries and stuff like that. But then I realized, I would probably be that brown person on the other end of the rifle scope in some way if I continued down that path. But rather than kill people, I'd rather save them. And so for a while, this was my life. And I use that in the sense of getting college money. And so when I started studying in a very prolific computer school, I started studying graphic design, web design, artificial intelligence. I talked to a computer in 4 different languages and tell it what to do. But I started gravitating towards art. It's been in my blood. I've had many artists before me, and that's come down from also my mother too. My grandma, she used to weave very large, intricate rugs to basically feed 10 children. And so she did that beautifully. And I remember as a kid actually following her very young, and she would tell me, this plant is reserved to make this color. We mix these plants and these roots, to create this, that, and the other. And so I still remember all those designs, as I sat, watching her weave, these intricate rugs that have designs and, at her loom and everything like that. And so a lot of that has come through me. And like I said, I have my mother also to thank for that as well. Bringing light to certain injustices. We talked about the Navajo Reservation. We talked about coal and everything like that. A lot of water gets pumped out from our aquifer and is used to basically provide water for a lot of other people. In Phoenix, just about 5 hours outside of our reservation, we have more golf courses per capita than any other place in the world. And yet we have to go and haul water sometimes like hours out of the day. And so we don't have electricity, we don't have a lot of these things. And so how do we use art in order to tell some of these stories? And so we have a mural that's downtown in Phoenix that we were able to create against the backdrop of ASU. And so ASU students on this 20-story building, we created this mural here, and it actually depicts the choices in life. You can have would be on this left here, the path of destruction that we're currently on, versus the holistic part of where we should be as people in terms of society. And so creating an image of Mother Earth, but also, not being too shy about naming some of the problems. And a lot of the buildings that this mural sits under are energy companies. And so those energy companies have a direct hand in what goes on in the destruction of our land, water, and resources from up north. And so this is a longer term project, but basically it tells the story of what it's like to live on the land and where we should be as Indigenous people. And so, doing large scale murals, go ahead and communicate this messaging so that students that attend ASU, whenever they look out their front window, they see this mural. And some of them may actually be children of some of these CEOs, of some of these corporations. But it's a longer term piece in terms of the resistance. And so these kids see this every day, and they come to hopefully make a decision, the right one, in order to basically protect the water, land, and air that we have left. And so using different mediums such as murals is just one aspect of resistance. I've actually gone on presidential campaigns and stuff like that and created beautiful art, in terms of our candidates that are up there. And so competing with other slick graphic design firms that have been paid off by coal industry and everything like that. But really what resonates with our people is the designs and the campaigns that come naturally from us up there. And so creating these images that really resonate with our people, using graphic design in that way, and taking influence from other campaigns, things that have worked, because right here you have the traditional rug designs right here. And so looking at the Indigenous youth, the adults, and also the elders, and creating campaigns that resonate so people can actually pay attention rather than just be fed something that's been pumped out of some graphic design firm from somewhere else. Also using just other images and stuff. I could tell you the story about this particular campaign, but using this is for the youth and everything like that. But again, creating campaigns that resonate for all walks of or different ages, in terms of our folks up there. So also direct action strategy, overtaking small or large scale exits and entrances to cities, pop-up installations and stuff like that, educating people, you know, that are on their way to work, grabbing their attention, you know, putting plays on words. You know, this actual imagery right here represents, you know, it's spelled wrong, but your mind wants to kind of fix that, but you're not realizing that you're being told an actual story. And so playing with language, playing with imagery, and basically uplifting the local community messaging and teaching people how to take these tools of existence and utilize them and take them back into their own homelands so that they may create them on their own is something that I do. So any type of street art, any type of media, I'm usually trying to promote that to other communities so that they may do this on their own. And so not being shy about naming things and having white folks in this actual particular direct action do the work because it's them who make the decisions. It's them in terms of white supremacy, white privilege, that they are the ones that actually benefit from all of that. And so, you know, creating like huge installations, you know, this is an elephant in the room right here, but I put out a living room scene where we had people of color sit there and engage with people passing by, white folks, so that we may talk about some of these hard subject matters, because I think that like the more that we're able to do that, the more we're able to advance as a society if we're really looking towards collective liberation in some way. And so the more that we get these stories out in the open, or get over this uncomfortableness, or, you know, the fact that you're on stolen land, the fact that like, you know, 100 to 140 million indigenous people aren't here anymore, where are we gonna go with that? But the more and more that we dance around some of these subjects, the further that pushes us out in terms of actually coming together in some way that really is going to be holistic and taking into consideration, you know, the history of this country. And so creating, you know, banners that are flipped around that tell a story, creating actual visible, you know, art pieces like this guy's wearing a white privilege blindfold, you know, that speaks to folks. And this action was very successful only because that I had black folks actually looking at all of this stuff and like saying, I never thought in my life that I would see a white person with an actual physical, you know, blinder of white privilege. And so it really resonated with the folks. And the reason why this was a pop-up installation was in the city of Seattle, white folks got mad that Black Lives Matter actually stormed the stage for a Bernie Sanders convention. And so it was the white folks that reached out to me and were like, hey, we want to write that, how do we do that? And so putting together some of these elements, deploying it in the central part of the city where people could engage with it, was something that like I'm able to do in different parts of the country for different movements. I was also asked to be a part of the People's Climate March, which was in 2014. I was probably one of only 6 other artists that were at the core of that. And so I spent probably about 3 months living on top of a rooftop, but this was my view. So we actually organized the People's Climate March in a way that actually told a story. So you had the frontline communities up front, the faith-based organization, a lot of other folks that are bearing the burden, as you can see the layout here, and addressing the future generations, who's responsible, naming some of these corporations or some of the injustice that's out there was something that was key, because in a march typically you have to flip the script on that, because a lot of times it's just a rabble full of signs and everything like that. But if you're able to organize this right, you can sit somewhere and actually see the story play out in front of you if it's designed correctly. And so that's what we were going after in this case. This actually got about 500,000 people in the streets of New York. And so a lot of difficult discussions, a lot of art that was there. And so being able to help out with some of these structures and sculptures and stuff like that, so that us as indigenous people had a space within inside of these climate movements, and being able to name a lot of what we were still up against in terms of little things like, all right, we're gonna have y'all, you know, be at the front of the march, but you're gonna do that at Columbus Square. Like, what? You're gonna have to do what, where? And, you know, so a lot of the work that I do is confronting even, you know, some of the racism and privilege inside of a lot of these organizations that are supposedly green and woke and all that stuff, but, you know, think that marching is gonna change something when buildings are shut down for the weekend, or yelling at certain like structures that's not gonna change anything really. And so I was able to see that firsthand in my experience here. And so there's so many different mediums that I was able to use and plug into. But it's really like this one here. We're talking about the military industrial complex, but we're using inflatables to tell that story. So you have to make minimal structures for that to go ahead and actually create a larger one so that you may deploy it at West Point Military Academy. And so U.S. military is the largest emitter of oil and the largest consumer of oil and the largest emitter of CO2. So creating huge inflatable structures so that people can finally get the idea about like, all right, we're connecting these two worlds here, I think is a very powerful tool. Those are some of my friends that actually did that. And so creating also large scale banners. I'm also an industrial climber too, so I can jump off of buildings or bridges or whatever and deploy these sometimes 3-foot banners. And so on the climate march, I had a chance to go ahead and do that. And so creating large scale installations with the help of a few of my friends, which I probably still owe some beers to, is something that I love doing as well. And so here you can actually see our target. And so this is about 3 stories, maybe 10 stories up in the air. And so we're able to tell these stories, and as the climate march was going by, to actually have these unfurled. And so to hear the roar of, you know, 500,000 people, it's exciting to be in those situations. But being able to contribute to some of that is actually really cool too. But also using art with our culture. When Donald Trump accepted the Republican nomination in Cleveland, Ohio, I was brought in to actually create an art bill that was going to wall off his hate. A lot of the government agencies, from the CIA to the FBI, NSA, you know, they're all looking for a physical wall. But what they didn't understand was that we weren't coming there with a physical wall. So with stencils utilizing street art, I'm able to make, you know, gates, fences, brick walls, and things like that. And, you know, with the help of the community, create banners that resonate with the community. But we're also using the facilities there in an off-site location to also create ponchos with this. Because traditionally, people from Mexico, they wore ponchos. And so being able to go into, you know, where the convention was and actually deploy ponchos as the wall itself, human bodies, using our culture, blocking entrance. This is all being done creatively and weaponizing our culture in a sense. And so you're seeing like how white people saw what was going on and they actually like kept the media back because this was a frenzy at this point. But you had white people showing up the way they should have in that sense. And so uplifting the voices of communities that are at risk, utilizing art for change is something that, you know, I'm able to do in a sense. So we had an incinerator on our reservation. At one point we had 7 incinerators, coal-fired, that surrounded our reservation. And so one of them actually was shut down by my uncle and the help of the grassroots. You know, my mom was involved in some of that, my family was involved in some of that. And so really being able to utilize art in a way that resonates with folks creating structures, videos, utilizing imagery that is reserved. This is a reference to hip hop, and everyone knows Run DMC and everything. But doing street art, large scale, we were able to actually win with the help of a lot of these videos that I actually created here, which I don't know if we're going to be able to listen to, but so basically weaponizing all the skills that I have in my toolbox in service for the greater good, my own people, as Indigenous people, and hopefully moving our message forward in some ways where I like to be. That's what I like to do in terms of what First 7 Design Labs is, and looking forward to hopefully being able to create a school of resistance that has some of these elements so that we can pass them on, because I can't die with all of this, but it would be great that if we could teach another level of younger folks that, hey, you see injustice in your community, here's the way that you can do something with it. Here's how you can actually benefit. And so some of these installations and everything like that, I'm just one person. I'm pretty selective about who I work with. So a lot of white NGO money, a lot of problematic taking it, and so because it's attached to a lot of different things too. But that's why I like to actually take part. And with my folks here, I had the pleasure of working with Ross, and I just met my good friend here. And so hopefully we can, be able to get some of the funding so that we can carry on this resistance, because once this is actually utilized properly and laser focused, it's unstoppable. It is literally unstoppable. And so, like I said, I'm just happy to be here, happy to share some of the story, and hopefully we can connect and build in some way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh! So we can open up for questions, comments.
Open for questions and comments.
Who wants to back us?
First, I want to ask if I can grab a copy of this.
Oh, yeah,
Amazing
sure. Yeah.
thing
You want to make it easy?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I can teach you.
Thank you.
And I have a video on the website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
I have more copies in my car. Questions? Comments?
You're so good at that.
so-
Oh my gosh.
Good before you freak us out.
This got me a voice to be part of I was a vocalist for Big Sur Midnight Sun, a symphonic piece by John Weinglass, who almost committed the faux pas of grabbing any native when he felt slightly haunted when he was creating his composition with the Big Sur Land Trust. He felt haunted, like there was an element of his composition that was incomplete. He realized the history of the land needs to be told in this, to be conveyed in this, and he almost committed the generic faux pas of any native will do. And thankfully, a non-Indigenous ally held space and said, whoa, 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 I have someone you need to talk to. And I wasn't advocating for myself for that position. However, I articulated myself reasonably enough, and he was really happy with my awesome skills. And so we get to bamble and bamboozle intriguing symphonic pieces, because the maestros and the symphonic piece are looking at it, says D minor for a very long time on their sheets. And they're like, what the heck goes here? And we literally riff. They play drums. We have a native flutist, a flautist, and there's a 6-foot redwood drum. Bigger than me. I can't even hug it. I can't even touch the top of it. Big redwood drum. And then me in regalia offering part of my grandmother's song. And I'm trying to make sure that they accurately represent me, because I'm like,